Hello, Anne. How are you?
Good. We look like we're in the center, where you always have the headphones on in the
You look
space
like
movies.
you look like you're in customer service in Sri Lanka or something. And people may notice for the first time we're wearing headphones. We've had some technical, at least I had some technical issues on my end.
I did too, which is why I'm wearing the
Um,
headphones.
okay. I don't know. We'll resolve that. Sometimes stuff just goes haywire. So the fabulous, just so people know, like usually this is what I have in my ear when we do. Oh, I see what the problem is. Though it's broken.
Well,
Oh,
that would do it.
wow. Did the piece like go into my head and fall into my brain?
Yee. It's
God,
very David Cronenberg.
I'd have a foolproof excuse for everything. Okay, so but now I can hear you just fine
Okay.
in good old fashioned headphones. So, how are you, Ann?
Good. I'm very well, thank you. Just
You should explain to people watching where you are. This is a big change for you.
you can see the sign in the background. I'm at Myers Plus Engineers. This is my day job. I work here as an office coordinator. And Eddie and I wanted to shoot before we went to Mexico, so we're doing it on my lunch hour at work.
We are, that's how dedicated we are. Yes. Yes, indeed. Yeah, and I'm heading out to go to the film festival in Morelia very soon, and and then back. And anyway, and since we last spoke, I did Noir City, DC, which, as everybody knows, is actually Silver Spring, Maryland, and not actually in DC proper. But that was terrific. Great fun. The audiences were terrific. Just had a wonderful time. So that's it. We're done with Noir City festivals for 2023. There are no more. The next one will be in January out here in the Bay Area. So
Yeah. Will we be doing
um,
North City Christmas this year?
I have a meeting about that later this afternoon. So I don't have an answer. I mean, I I certainly hope so, but we're trying to nail down the actual date. So no further info at the moment. Anyway,
Okay.
and once again, I will say, Anne, how many people I encountered in DC who asked me to give you their regards
Oh,
because they
you.
are loyal watchers of whatever this is that we do, and and yes, it's absolutely fantastic to know that so many people watch this and get something out of it and are waiting for their questions to be answered. So we better jump into it.
Right.
Okay.
And just let everybody know these questions we're now up to May. So
Woo! That's pretty exciting. We're really, maybe it'd be amazing if we could get through 2023's questions by the end of 2023. That would be
that'd
good.
be very cool.
Yeah. Okay. Let's hit it. You want to kick us off?
I'll kick us off. And this is from our friends Jay and Connie in Ann Arbor.
I just saw them in Washington D.C.
When you do Grand Lake intro and outro shoots, what kind of crew do you have, or is it self-inflicted?
Self-inflicted. I like that. Um, yes, obviously. Well, I may as well say this because this will air. This one is going to broadcast when? Like
Uh, the second, November 2nd.
November 2nd. Okay, so the cat will be out of the bag by then. Uh, there is no more Noir Alley set. The set is gone, and probably will never be rebuilt.
Okay.
just just part of the all-encompassing belt tightening at Turner Classic Movies, as um, required by Warner Brothers Discovery. So they just thought it was too expensive to build that set every time I went to Atlanta and took it down. So when I do the shoots at the Grand Lake Theater, as I have done in the past, there is a crew that is hired out here in the Bay Area. Coincidentally, the guy who runs that crew, his name is Les Milne, and Milne, of course, is also my wife's name. that they are not in any way related. But I thought that was kind of intriguing. And so Les puts the crew together, and he has his camera and sound people and all this stuff. And I've worked with them quite a bit. But by the time if people watch Noir Alley, by the time they see this, they will see me in my new set, which is an actual bar in Oakland, California, called Bar 355. These very nice guys who own it, Patrick and Travis. We made a deal with them so I could come in on their day off and shoot the show in there, and it's great. I mean, in some ways, I mean, it couldn't be more accommodating. I'm sorry to lose the set in Atlanta, which everybody really loved, and but now I don't have to travel to Atlanta.
Which is nice.
Now I just drive 10 minutes to this bar which, I frequented anyway. So it's just so funny that I had no expectation when, Kathleen and I just walked into that bar one night and it was like, this is a really nice place. This is, this works. This is good. It's our style. And who knew that eventually I'd be shooting Noir Alley from that bar. So, that's how that works. No, I was only Jay and Connie. Things were only self-inflicted, as you say, when COVID was really bad, and I was shooting from here, from this room. I was shooting episodes of Noir Alley, and that was done entirely by myself, where I had to do everything, be the camera and the sound guy and the gaffer and the whole bit, all that. So although that was interesting and I enjoyed it up to a point, I'm glad those days are over. So
Okay.
that's that.
That's that.
Okay, so Loren in Chicago. Loren's good. He asked a lot of questions. I've heard you mention several times on your show that there were plans to make a film version of Hammett's book Red Harvest, starring Alan Ladd. That is correct. You also added that the film was never made for various reasons, not under that title for sure. Does a screenplay of that film exist, and can it be purchased? Well, Loren, if you have a spare $12,000 lying around, you can, in fact, purchase that, and unless it has been purchased already. Know that it belonged to the great Otto Penzler of the Mysterious Bookstore in New York, who is, the dean of American crime fiction. And he's done so many anthologies and everything. I mean, he's just, he's been doing this for decades and decades. And Otto I never actually asked him how he came in possession of that screenplay. But he owns it, and he has it under consignment to Kevin Johnson at Royal Books. And the last time I looked, it was $12,000. Was like they do auctions and stuff, and it was, I think, 12,000 was the you couldn't get it for less than $12,000. So I have not read it, but indeed it was after The Glass Key. Paramount just thought, and Jonathan Latimer wrote the screenplay, who also wrote The Glass Key, who is one of my favorite screenwriters. So it's kind of hard to believe that I haven't read this script yet, but it's not something that's easily copied. It's so valuable because it's the original script. You don't want to take it apart and Xerox it and stuff like that. I mean, I do have a copy over here somewhere. I have of Raymond Chandler's original script for The Lady in the Lake, which was not the version that was shot. But that's not the original script. That's a photocopy that we came across somehow. And so, yeah, that's I would love it if there was some way to just read it. It's kind of tricky because I guess in theory, that is still the property of Paramount Pictures. So if you wanted to publish it, you'd have to somehow make a deal, I guess, with them. So I don't think you're going to be seeing that anytime soon, Loren. Okay.
Okay. And this is Ryan from Rhode Island. Can you think of an actor slash actress with a noir performance that surprised you given the films or TV you had seen them in before? I'm thinking of Richard Kiley in Pick Up on South Street or John Dahl in Gun Crazy as examples.
Wow. Ryan from Rhode Island. Those are two examples I would not have thought of because, of course, the number one example, and I'm not going to bet anything you'd agree with me on this, Anne,
No,
is Fred McMurray,
uh,
right? Because I think most people my age, right, first saw Fred McMurray as the father on My Three Sons,
no,
and so it really was a shock to see him in Double Indemnity and the other noir films that he made, or even The Apartment. It's a
yeah,
shock to see him in The Apartment after seeing him in My Three Sons, and that was closer, because he started doing My Three Sons, I think, not that long after he made The Apartment. So that was kind of a strange twist of casting. Uh, and of course, if it's not Fred McMurray, the obvious answer is Raymond Burr,
hmm
right? Who I think everybody, I saw Raymond Burr as Perry Mason before I saw him in all the noir films. So to see him being such a heavy and literally like twice the size he was in Perry Mason, uh, that was a bit of a shock to realize there was this whole other thing. And it's baffling to think of why they cast him as Perry Mason when his film career,
yeah,
it is this one film, Please Murder Me, is the film that he made, which we may be able to restore at some point. But Please Murder Me was interesting because he plays a defense attorney who gets a femme fatale acquitted of murder, but she's actually guilty. And that figures it. And Angela Lansbury plays the femme fatale,
ooh,
another future TV star,
yeah,
working in early noir. And I think that was the film that sort of got their attention. Earl Stanley Garner and Gail Patrick, who was one of the producers of the show. I'm never sure. I don't know this for. I wonder if Gail Patrick, who was an actress, you've
yeah,
seen her in
yeah.
if Gail Patrick had ever worked with Raymond Burr in a film, and if she was responsible for getting him that role, like or suggesting him, because the it wasn't that long after Rear Window
Yeah.
that he became Perry Mason, and it's like, who would have thought that Lars Thorwald would be playing this heroic defense attorney? Um, Anybody you can think of? Any TV actors that you were surprised to see in noir?
Um, Nothing's coming up right now. I think I was going to say too, for me, Raymond Burr, I knew more from Ironside because that was a
Okay,
really
yeah,
big. And
yeah.
also, Jim Thompson wrote an Ironside novelization.
I am aware. I actually own that. Yes.
I own it too.
It's interesting. That shows perfectly our age difference. That I would always say Raymond Burr is Perry Mason, and you
Yeah,
would say Raymond Burr is Ironside. Not that I didn't watch Ironside when I was a kid, uh, but or a teenager at least. But I definitely remember him first on Perry Mason. The other one that is interesting because I didn't. There are so many people you could name for this, but they're not synonymous with film noir. Like I love when I see Hugh Beaumont or
hmm
Barbara Billingsley in one of these old noir films, but they're not in any way synonymous with film noir the way Raymond Burr is, or just because of, even though Fred McMurray is not what I would consider a noir actor. I mean, he's the star of the most famous noir film.
yeah,
But the other guy who I first saw on TV was Harry Morgan, right?
yeah, yeah.
Who was
No,
in this sitcom-y thing, Pete and Gladys. It was, I forget what it was called. It was something else before, something bride or marriage or something, that then became Pete and Gladys. And I remember that show being on television in reruns early in the morning when I was growing up. And then, of course, he was with Jack Webb in
Yeah.
Dragnet. And so, but it was the Pete and Gladys one where he was kind of a comic
Yeah.
that surprised me when I later saw him in noir films. And that was really a surprise because Raymond Burr still has a lot of gravitas, whether he's playing, a heavy in noir or Perry Mason, you know, uh, but it's so funny to see Harry Morgan playing sinister characters in film noir. Like we just showed The Big Clock in DC, and he
Yeah.
plays that sinister guy, the henchman for Charles Lawton. And so it is kind of a surprise to see Harry Morgan as a bad guy in noir films because, obviously everybody also knows him as, Colonel Potter
Yeah.
on MASH. I think it would be surprising for people to see him in noir after if that was their initial exposure to him.
Yeah. And for me, Dragnet was really surprising um, because he's such a goofball in it. You know what I mean? And also the fact that Dragnet just would break into these scenes where they were basically just doing like a routine.
Yeah, exactly. And you've seen the famous sketch on the Tonight Show, right, with Johnny Carson and Jack Webb, where they're trying to keep a straight face while they're
Yeah.
doing the impossibly complex rhyming
Mm-hmm.
noir dialogue. It's pretty great. It's not rhyming dialogue. It's what do you call it?
Alliteration.
Alliteration. Thank you. Yes. That's pretty funny. If people haven't seen that, they should look that up. Easy to find on YouTube. This is
It
the world
is.
we live in now. It's like super easy to find it on YouTube. I'm now even incorporating that into some of my Noir Alley outros. It's like I'll say, and if you haven't seen this thing on YouTube, you should go check it out.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to be showing next year. I Died 1,000 Times, the Jack Palance version of High Sierra, and Pedro Gonzalez has a role in that. And if people haven't seen his breakout performance, which is on You Bet Your Life with Groucho Marx, where he does this whole comedy shtick thing with Groucho, kind of pretending to be a contestant when he's actually it's a setup and he's being
Yeah.
really funny. It's hysterical. It's what got him his show business career. John Wayne saw him on that show and said, "I got to bring this guy to Hollywood."
Oh, wow.
It's pretty funny. I mean, so and I say, go to YouTube as soon as we're done here and watch this because you're seeing two comic masters at work.
Yeah. And while you're there, you should look up Jack Benny, the Lunch Counter Murders, because Dan Duryea was the guest star, and they're doing like the beginning of the Killers.
Oh, fantastic! I've never seen
Yeah.
that.
Oh my God. And Dennis Day plays this henchman who keeps imitating Dan Duryea. And
Okay,
it's
Jack Benny, The
really
Lunch
fun.
Counter Murders
The
with
Lunch
Dan
Counter
Duryea.
Murders.
Okay, I'm doing that as soon as we're done here. I'm going to go watch that. Okay,
Okay.
now here is Joe in Redondo Beach, California. It seems that many classic noir actors and actresses, well, this is fun. Here you go again, syncing these up. Many classic noir actors and actresses were able to parlay their fame into popular TV series in the 50s and 60s. Do either of you have a favorite TV show in that regard? Joe's favorite was Ben Casey, starring Vince Edwards. Another example of, why did they think that he would? Well, obviously, he was a very handsome guy.
Yeah.
Uh, but why they thought, because it just, he was never a good guy in noir,
Yeah.
and yet they cast him as heroic crusading surgeon Ben Casey. I don't. I'm kind of stumped here, Joe, because it's obviously Raymond Burr. I mean, it's the
Yeah.
same. I don't think anybody who was so synonymous with noir and playing heavies was able to turn that into a huge TV career more than Raymond Burr. I mean, he is the classic example uh, of that person who transitioned to television. There are a lot of others who did it, but they didn't have shows built around them. They were just cast in shows. But with Raymond Burr, both Perry Mason and Ironside were like his shows. I mean, how popular do you have to be that when you get so heavy, it's difficult for you to work? So they write a show where you get to play the whole thing in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. And most people that went from noir to their own kind of TV shows, they did a lot of other things in film as well. It wasn't, they weren't, he was the one that really was very noir focused and went on to have a show. Because you could like Barbara Stanwyck, but she also, but she had done a ton of
Yes.
other things besides film noir.
Yeah, exactly. And there's just all kinds of people who transition between movies and TV or vice versa. Uh, but none that I would consider synonymous with film noir the way. Uh, there was Dan Duryea. He did China Smith, The Adventures of China Smith,
There
and
you
he
go.
he was pretty much he made a lot of westerns and a lot of straight dramas as well. But I guess that's the other one that I would say, Adventures of China Smith, which the movie World for Ransom, the Robert Aldrich
Yeah.
movie, it is the basis of the Adventures of China Smith. So, which is more an adventure story in a
Hmm.
way than a film noir. So even though it came out at that time and it felt like it had elements of noir. I never include it in any festivals or anything because even though it's Dan Duryea, because it just to me doesn't feel like a film noir. It feels more like a dark adventure story.
Yeah, me too.
Um, is it me now?
Actually, it's me,
Oh, it's you.
Kathleen from
Okay.
Chicago. Before film noir became a thing in the 1940s, there were other films that had strong noir elements, either in style or content or both. Some writers have referred to these films from the 1920s and 30s, and even before, as proto-noir. What are some of the best and or most influential proto-noirs?
Hmm. Um, well, that's kind of interesting with the silent films, and I've shown many at the Silent Film Festival.
Yeah.
That I owe, that's the whole reason they asked me to introduce them is because the films feel like they're a precursor to noir, or as Kathleen says, proto-noir. Um, how influential they are is kind of hard to say, but I mean, obviously, films like the von Sternberg films,
Hmm.
Underworld and Thunderbolt and Docks of New York, are very, very noir. Uh, I'm not entirely certain of their influence. I think Underworld was influential because it was like the first real gangster
Hmm.
movie, right? Um, I'm thinking of things like the films that Ben Hecht directed in the 1930s, in addition to writing, because he would go on to write so many noir films. I feel like there's an obvious trail there.
Yeah.
So he did this wonderful film. I think it was 1934 called Crime Without Passion. Have you seen that?
I don't think so.
He plays a very arrogant defense attorney who commits murder and then defends himself in the courtroom. Very creative film. Really amazing direction. It has a title sequence by Slavko Vorkopich that is unbelievable. Like the Furies coming out of the sky and shattering the penthouse windows of these apartments, and then the falling glass turns into the title of the movie.
Ooh.
It's absolutely spectacular. And Claude Rains, it's like the first absolutely great Claude Rains performance. And Ben Hecht did a few of those. He also did a picture with Noel Coward called The Scoundrel that is based on it's based on a novel that Ben Hecht wrote, and that's pretty great. I showed those on a double bill ages ago, like in 2006 when Noir City was at the Palace of Fine Arts. And then he also did a film like in 1940, I think it was, called Angels Over Broadway. That's very much a proto noir kind of thing. So, and he was doing all these movies with Lee Garms, who was the cameraman, but Hecht pretty much credited him as the co-director on these films because Ben Heck didn't know anything about cameras or any of that stuff. And so he would write this stuff and he'd have these outrageous ideas, and then Lee Garms would help him bring them to fruition. Pretty cool.
Yeah.
And then another guy that I really like is Roland Brown, who did like pre-code movies like Quick Millions and Blood Money, most of them at 20th Century Fox. Spencer Tracy is in those, and George Raft is in a couple. And they're just very different, very creative, kind of a nonchalant approach to crime that was so interesting that I feel that's what again, I don't know how influential these movies were, but those Roland Brown movies, he was so familiar with criminals and himself, and so kind of like Hammett, that they weren't at all shocked by this world of criminal behavior. It was, they found it kind of attractive, and so Roland Brown's movies are really they're ahead of their time in the depiction of the world of criminals. They're not forgiving in any way, but accepting. Like
Yeah.
this is how crime works. So those were really good. Quick Millions is especially interesting.
Yeah,
Interesting.
and I think too. Well, I wanted to shout out M, which I do think was a very influential film
Yes.
on noir, and then also I think Warner Brothers, in terms of studios, was sort of the most influential on noir with their gangster films and their ripped from the headline films.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, stuff like I Was a Fugitive or I Am a Fugitive from a Chain Gang, and and just the look of those films, those Saul Polito, who photographed a lot of those, doesn't get a lot of credit as being a noir cinematographer, but he's pretty spectacular, and
Yeah.
he shot a few, like he shot Out of the Fog at Warner Brothers, and then he shot Sorry, Wrong Number for Hal Wallace later. Hal Wallace obviously, had been the head of production at Warner Brothers, and so when he went independent, he got Saul Polito to shoot a few of those films, brought him over from Warner Brothers.
And
Um,
also Val Lewton at RKO.
absolutely, absolutely. Um, although that's interesting because that's more, rather than proto-noir, I see those as kind of hybrid noir because
Yeah,
it
yeah,
shows how because Luton was making those pictures at the same time noir was starting to happen, and
yeah.
how, I mean, it was influential. Those films were influential, but I don't know how influential they were on crime films as much as they were influential on horror films.
Yeah, I
But
want to,
then,
but I think also like when you look at the film shot at the film noir shot at RKO, I think you really see the visual style
oh,
crossing
absolutely,
over.
and yeah, and you got to give a lot of credit to Nick Musaraka, who photographed a lot of those films. I think Harry Wilde photographed a few of them, but mostly it was Musaraka and
Yeah.
those, and just how creative that team was of Jacques Tourneur and Mark Robeson and Luton and those cinematographers. Really, that was astounding, very influential stuff. Um, me now?
Yes, you.
Okay, me now. Okay, Richard from New York recently saw A Woman's Face, starring Joan Crawford, directed by George Cukor. Uh, I thought it was excellent, and Ms. Crawford was superb in the role of Anna Holm. It was a very important role for her at the time, since her career at MGM was faltering. She credited this role as being a stepping stone in terms of her being taken seriously as an actress, which led to her being cast in such noir films as Mildred Pierce and Possessed. Uh, do I consider this a film noir? And if so, would I consider showing it on Noir Alley? Um, yeah, I would. Although there are other more obviously. I'm not going to show a woman's face on Noir Alley before I show Sudden Fear on
Oh,
Noir Alley, right? Which
yeah.
which I haven't been able to arrange yet, but I certainly would love to. But I have shown I've shown Mildred Pierce. I've shown Possessed. I've shown The Damned Don't Cry. I've shown Flamingo Road. Uh, I like Joan Crawford movies, and I'll get around all of them. And A Woman's Face is it's interesting. Several reasons why it doesn't get considered to be a film noir is number one is of course because it's directed by George Cukor, who nobody associates with noir, even though he directed A Double Life, which is completely a film noir. It's an MGM early 40s film, and the normal chronology of events does not have it that MGM would make anything like that at that time. So it tends to get left out because it's inconvenient for the contrived narrative of noir. Uh, but I have to tell you, Richard, I have shown the original version of A Woman's Face at the Noir City Festival. Did you see it?
I did. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
with
have seen
Ingrid
it.
Bergman. Ingrid
Yes.
Bergman, made in Sweden when she was really young. I think
Yeah.
she was still a teenager or something when she made that film, and she's tremendous in it. And so obviously, if I would show that and call it a noir, I have no problem showing A Woman's Face. And she has that great, you know, we should do a feature on women with scarred faces in noir, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
There's Joan, and there's obviously Gloria Graham in The Big Heat, and I will of course mention Belita, who had an actual scar on her face that is only visible in the movie The Hunted. Uh, yeah, she had a skating accident that
Ah.
all the way down the side of her face was a scar, which they covered up, except in The Hunted when they didn't completely cover it up because it added so much weirdness to the performance. It was great. Yeah, so that's the answer to that one, Richard. Yes, I will show it. I hope I get the chance.
Yeah. And this is from Marty in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin. I just watched Deception for the first time. What an amazing film with the main performances by Bette Davis, Paul Heinrich, but especially Claude Rains. I wanted to know your thoughts on the film, but especially the ending. For me, it was a total letdown with such an awesome noir premise of a love triangle and deception between the three main characters building up to a climax at the end that leaves you shrugging your shoulders because of the lack of payoff.
Well, this is funny. So obviously these questions are from May because I doubt Marty would be asking this question now because I just showed Deception on Noir Alley and talked about this very thing. Uh, I really really like that film just because of its incredible style and how can you not like seeing those actors go at each other. Claude
Mm-hmm.
Rains is just spectacular
Yeah.
in this film. Uh, and it's funny, I went out of my way to talk about his restaurant scene where he's making a big show of how what a gourmand he is in this scene, and he's eating the pheasant and the whole thing and ordering his truffles, and I love that scene. Um, anyway, but the end of the movie, I make a point of saying this is how big Bette Davis was, is that she could get away with murder because
Hmm.
that, I mean, I don't want to give spoilers or anything, uh, but she kills Claude Rains in the movie,
Yeah.
and you don't see her. I mean, she confesses the crime to her lover, Paul Henry, but nothing happens. They just walk away at the end, and it's assumed that she's going to do the right thing and report it to the police, but no, I get the feeling that as soon as they walk out the door, she's just going to overwhelm him and say, well, Carol, it's not necessary for me to do this because I'll carry this the rest of my life. What more punishment do I need, and blah blah blah. And so only that's how big a star Bette Davis was. She could actually get away with murder even during the height of the production code.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily know that. I find the ending so interesting that I can't actually call it a letdown. it's kind of shocking in its own weird way because nothing happens. And that's the shock. It's kind of a reverse shock. You're waiting for the police to swoop in and they don't.
Yeah.
So it's, to me, that was really interesting.
Yeah, like cuz I don't know. I guess yeah, cuz I mean that didn't bother me, I guess, because when the
Yeah,
question came
yeah,
in,
yeah.
seriously, like when the question came in, like I wound up like looking up the internet because I thought, did I miss something at the end? And I kind of thought that like shooting him was enough of a resolution of the story.
It's really interesting because like 3 or 4 times I questioned when I was writing this, like this does actually happen, right? Because I said, was there like, did I bat my eyes and there was a thing where he says, tell it to the police or something. And it's like, no, it doesn't happen. They just
Yeah,
walk away at the end, you know?
yeah,
Uh, interesting.
yeah,
Love that movie. I'm glad that Marty liked the film as much as he did, but don't. It's just interesting. I mean, it could have been a super melodramatic thing, but there's no way that unless she's going to get a colossal death scene, there's no way that Betty Davis was going to settle for some petty, tacked on PCA enforced ending to that movie. It was
yeah,
like, let's just do this and see what happens. And somehow, when you're big, you can get away with that stuff. Like I always, that the production code did not allow suicide in movies, right? Don't tell it to Joan Crawford because if you've seen Humoresque,
yeah,
she has like one of the great suicides in movie history in that film, and it's like, how did they get away with that? You know, and it's because she's Joan Crawford and Betty Davis
yeah,
is Betty Davis. If you're a Del Jurgens or Virginia Mayo or something, you may not get away with it. But when you're as big as those two, I don't, and you know what I mean by get away with it, like
yeah.
violate the code.
Well, and Barbara Stanwyck in The Furies. And I'm not going to say because I don't want to give away what
Don't spoil it.
happens,
Don't spoil it.
but I'll just say, yeah, what she gets away with in that film was like, I don't think anyone else could have gotten away with what she gets away with in that film.
So it's kind of an interesting take on this stuff because as much as it's conventional wisdom to say that these actresses were powerless in Hollywood, when you reached a certain level of popularity and fame, you did have power. I mean, Betty Davis had a lot of power in Hollywood,
The
as
fifth
did
Warner Brothers.
exactly. Uh, so that's just an interesting way of thinking about how they could wield their power is being able to do things in defiance of the production code.
Yeah,
Kind of
plus
kind of interesting.
yeah, and Barbara Stanwyck also was never under contract. So, which like if you think about that in the height of the studio system, that she was an independent player is really amazing. But it gave her obviously a lot of freedom to do a lot of really great films because she wasn't being forced into roles she didn't want.
Exactly. Because there were so many things that she was considered for, and then it didn't work out. And then they went with a actress who was under contract at that studio because she just floated around and did wherever the best role was, she would go there and take it. Very, very. I can tell we have a lot of respect for Barbara Stanwyck.
We do have a lot of respect for Barbara Stanwyck.
Okay, Andy says or asks, what are your favorite noir movies that use amnesia as a major plot device? Holy God, this is opening a can of worms. Hang on one second. I think I had a. Hang on one second. I'm gonna see if I can find this because I made a list of films, noir films with amnesia. I know I have this somewhere. So hang on one sec. Might as well get to this list. Anyway, one of Andy's favorites is the wacky Somewhere in the Night, in which John Hodiak runs around looking for the mysterious Larry Cravat. We won't give away that spoiler there, Andy. I wonder how Joseph Mankiewicz would be about your referring to Somewhere in the Night as wacky. I don't think that was his intention when he made that film, but it does have some wacky elements because we have seen that plot in the interim so many times,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, it made me think of that Hal Hartley film with Martin Donovan, where he has amnesia. I can't remember the name of it for the life of me.
I don't think I've seen it, but Somewhere in the Night is basically was William Hortzberg redid it as Angel Heart, or it wasn't called Angel Heart. I think his book was called Fallen Angel, I think,
Yeah,
or something like that. And then they made Angel Heart, the movie, out of that, which is one of those like Alias Nick Beale type fantasy horror supernatural crime things.
yeah.
But I think the first noir that uses it was Street of Chance, which is Cornell Woolrich, and
Based
then it
on
was
Black Alibi.
Black Alibi, correct. And I know that The Crooked Way with John Payne is an amnesia noir, and let's see, I just showed one on Noir Alley, 2 O'Clock Courage with Tom Conway. That's an amnesia noir, which was made earlier in the 30s as I can't remember the title right now. Come on, help me out, Ann. What are some of the other ones that are well, Spellbound? Hitchcock's Spellbound, of course, is an amnesia story. There's a really good Eric Ambler movie called The October Man with John Mills. That's the one with I love this one. The Frederick Brown wrote it. God, this is so weird. I know the source material is called Madman's Holiday, and it Crack Up with Pat O'Brien, where he is on the train, and then there's
I like Claire Trevor's in it too.
Yes, indeed, Claire Trevor. Many costume changes for Claire Trevor.
Yeah, a lot of hats.
Yes, indeed. But I really like that. That's a great art film. I don't mean it's a film with art as the background because he works in a museum. And then there's all kinds of Woolrich.
Yeah, I was going to say
used it more than anybody else.
Yeah,
like Black Angel. Black Angel with Dan Duryea is. I mean, it's an amnesia film, but it's also he's an alcoholic, so he's also kind of blacking out from the alcohol. But if you want to just say memory loss instead of amnesia, whatever the motivation is for the memory loss.
And then there's the one of his that was done twice, even though it might be actually two different stories of his adapted, where the guy's brother-in-law is a cop.
Are you thinking about Fear in the Night?
Is that Fear in the Night? And then the other one I think is called
Nightmare.
Nightmare. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. With Edward G. Robinson and Kevin McCarthy.
Yeah.
And then there's also High Wall with Robert Taylor, where he has amnesia. That's pretty great. I'm a big fan of High Wall.
It's and then really
can we consider Hangover Square in this? Because
in a way,
Laird Krieger has his fugue states where he does stuff and can't remember doing it. That figures prominently in the film. And I see there's just so many. The other Woolrich one, of course, is The Chase with Bob Cummings, where he has no memory of it, which is a goofy plot. But I really loved the movie because it's so inexplicable. And then the guy who directed it, Arthur Ripley, did another one that was kind of an amnesia noir called Voice in the Wind with Francis Lederer. there's a lot. There's a
Yeah.
lot, and I can't. Maybe that's enough. I mean,
Yeah.
those are all like classic era. I'm probably missing one obvious one, but
I feel that way too. I feel like there's something that we're that we're missing, but I don't know
well,
what
then
it
then
is.
there's the more recent noir films that use it. Like, I mean, I, as you well know, Anne, I love Mulholland Drive.
Yeah.
And that has amnesia as
Yeah.
part of the plot, right? Where Laura Herring can't remember who she is when she comes out of the car wreck in the hills. And and I guess in some ways Memento
Hmm.
is kind of an amnesia. It's just a I don't know, is it amnesia? I mean, he can't remember, right? It's his short-term memory
Yeah, I
is
want to say
going. So
that's called retrograde amnesia, I think. I'm not sure.
yeah. And now it just dawned on me. There's another RKO picture from Richard Fleischer called the Clay Pigeon. Clay Pigeon with Bill Williams, which is also a amnesia noir. Uh, anyway, there were a lot of them, but I guess the question was why. Why was this such a popular thing? And I just think it's because the trend and I think Sharon Knoll wrote a piece in our Noir City magazine about this. If it wasn't specifically about amnesia, I think we may have even done one on just that. She wrote a piece about psychoanalysis in noir, and I think the two kind of go hand in hand because it's this whole thing about the treacherous terrain being inside the mind, right?
Yeah.
It's not just dangerous out there, it's dangerous in here because you either can't remember stuff or suppressed memories. That's a like Hitchcock's Marnie is also suppressed memory movie.
And the locket.
The Locket, absolutely, The Locket, that's a great example. I think that the rise in psychoanalysis and Freudian psychology and all of that kind of stuff was kind of timed to this era as well.
Yeah.
So in some ways, it's as much of an influence on the storytelling as all the other factors that people talk about. Like the Cold War and the paranoia.
Oh, Screaming Mimi.
Screaming Mimi, good one. Yes, yes, with Anita Ekberg, Phil
That's what
Carey.
it was.
That's another Frederick Brown story. Same guy who wrote Madman's Holiday that they made crack up from. He also wrote Screaming Mimi, which is a goofy movie. I mean, I don't know what the hell that movie is. Honestly, it's kind of half noir, half horror film,
Yeah.
uh,
Bit of sexploitation.
and somewhat of a sexploitation film. Like you didn't get Anita Ekberg in a movie in the 1950s and not exploit her sex appeal. I mean,
Yeah.
that was pretty amazing. And right, and Gypsy Rose Lee is in it too. So there's a lot of burlesque. Although it's hard to even call it burlesque. The dances that Anita Ekberg does in that movie, I don't know what those are.
It's
Right?
almost interpretive dance. I mean,
It's almost interpretive dance in very skimpy outfits.
yeah,
Yeah.
it, everyone should see that. I loved it when you played it because I'd never. You played it, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. And
Yeah.
I remember because we saw it up on the big screen. And it was just like,
Yeah. Gerd Oswald directed that.
mm,
He directed a lot of episodes of Perry Mason as well. But he did A Kiss Before Dying and Screaming Mimi and Crime of Passion, the Stan Wick picture with Sterling Hayden.
oh, such a good
So
movie.
yeah, so he had a nice run there in the late 50s and then mostly directed television after that. I mean, okay, so that was a
Okay.
lot of we were able to come up with a lot of films for that.
Yeah.
Okay, your turn.
Let's see. After reading Sharon Knowles' article, Hard Luck Dogs, How Animals Reveal the Tender Hearts of Noir, in Noir City issue 17, I've been keeping score on which is more common in Noir films, cats or dogs. Don't tell Charlotte, but it's currently cats 9, dogs 22. One of my favorite dog cameos is a dachshund that wanders into a shot and appears to be begging the camera operator for a snack and cry vengeance. Sorry, I couldn't find any information on Mark Stevens' film in your wonderful Dark City, The Lost World of Film Noir revised edition. Since the olive Blu-ray has no commentary or special features, all I could do was play connect the dots on IMDb. I was wondering if you might have some insights or thoughts on this fun film noir. Any info would be greatly appreciated. James in Atlanta.
Interesting. So those Mark Stevens films, sadly, have really slipped between the cracks. I think UA was he made these films independently, and I know that Jake Hinkson wrote a really great profile of Mark Stevens in one issue of our magazine quite a few years ago now. I'm going to say that was maybe 10 years ago. And when it wasn't the magazine, when it was just the newsletter at that point. But that, maybe we'll pull that out and do a revised edition of it or something, or a revised version. But Mark Stevens was an interesting guy because he became an independent producer and very much wanted to follow in the Dick Powell, John Garfield, Burt Lancaster. I'm going to make my own movies, and he very smartly made lower budget films and a couple of crime pictures, Cry Vengeance and Timetable, which is a pretty darn good heist movie. But it never, even though he had his own company and everything, he never really caught on. And for whatever reason, that's a classic example of the kind of stuff that slips between the cracks because he owned the films and he made distribution deals. This is very much like what Dick Powell did with Cry Danger, and some of actors who would do this say, no, I'm going to own it. But then they lose track of it, and so I don't really know. I think UA still has Cry Vengeance. I showed it probably, I'm going to say 17 or 18 years ago in Hollywood. It is a pretty interesting movie. It's set in the Pacific Northwest. It goes from Seattle up to Alaska, and it's very, very unusual setting for a movie. Anyway, yeah, a hunt has to be undertaken to find these and kind of at least Timetable, which I think you can see like in a bad version on YouTube, but that's a film that deserves to be restored and recirculated. But that's about all I can tell you. I mean, there's a lot I could say about Mark Stevens. He obviously got his break because he was, I think he was 4F during the war, and he started at Warner Brothers. He ended up at Fox, where they changed his name. I think his name was like Stephen Marks or something. They turned it to Mark Stevens. But he was one of those actors who got his chance because of the war, because he wasn't in the military. So like The Dark Corner, which he starred in at Fox, was clearly a role that was intended for Dana Andrews or somebody like that. And instead Mark Stevens got it. But Lucille Ball kind of steals the picture. He's Clifton Webb and William Bendix and Lucille Ball. And Mark Stevens doesn't make a huge impression in that movie, but he's not bad.
Yeah, I like Mark Stevens in that movie, actually.
Yeah, he's pretty good,
Yeah. And he had good chemistry with Lucille Ball. They had really good chemistry.
Yeah, but he never really became that leading man. And so he took matters into his own hands and decided to make his own movies. And like I just explained, I mean, it would be nice if they were more readily available. So I don't know. We'll see if we can do anything about that.
And I just want, because we mentioned 2 articles by Sharon, I just wanted to remind people that we do have digital back issues available at northcitymagazine.com, or you can just go to filmnoirfoundation.org and go from there if you want. But because there's just so if you're a newer subscriber to the magazine, you've never read the old ones. Whenever we mention these articles, you can still read them because they annuals do go out of print. Which, by the way, is a reminder we have a new annual out, so it is worth getting those kind of sooner than later. But like I said, the nice thing about the back issues, though, is that they have everything, whereas the annuals are sort of pulled from one year's issues.
Yeah, we cherry pick for the annuals. I think both of those stories we referenced from Sharon, the animals in noir and the psychoanalysis. I think both of those are in the annuals. They both made it in the
Yeah.
annuals. But if you want to find, um, the original stuff, then you can get those. I know that the psychoanalysis issue, it's the cover story. I don't know which issue. I can't remember at the moment which issue her Animals and Noir story was in, but it was not the cover story.
Yeah.
Uh, so I have to go through my list and figure all this stuff out, like where you can find certain stories.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Who is it? Is it
It's you.
me? It's me. Okay. Uh, and this is our last question because we're doing this in a timely fashion this time because Anne is being so good about doing it from work. We don't want she's got to do it on her lunch hour. We don't want her to get in trouble, you know.
Yeah.
Okay. Steve in Exeter, New Hampshire says film noir movie posters are great to look at. I agree.
Me too.
All the ones I've come across seem to have pulp influences. What started that? Well, you've answered your own question, Steve. It was uh, just that was the American style. I mean, was it pulp paperbacks or magazines? It was definitely the magazines because the paperbacks didn't really figure until the later 40s. Uh, were all movie posters of the time generally the same in this regard, or were there any more subtle styles? Steve, you need to get my book. You need a copy of The Art of Noir, where I kind of go through and explain studio by studio how they all had a different visual approach to promoting the movies. I mean, Warner Brothers posters were very different than everything else. They were all about the typography and they had mostly duotone, not full color images. So if you look at posters for things like The Man I Love or Mildred Pierce or Conflict, any of those Warner Brothers produced movies, it's very creative. The lettering on the posters is very creative, but they don't use a lot of color. Very different, say, from 20th Century Fox posters, which were full color, beautiful illustrations. They used a process called stone lithography, where they actually are using acid to etch the illustration into stone, and then that's how it's printed. Um, and Republic Pictures had a very distinctive uh, hard black line on the art with watercolor was used for their to color their posters. Very interesting. RKO had spectacular posters. Like the Out of the Past poster by William Rose is really great. Anyway, they all the studios had a different approach. MGM was the worst because they just featured the stars' names as big as they possibly could, and they tried to pack as many stars in as possible. So some of the posters are just these terrible graphic listing of stars without particularly good imagery. That's why the poster for The Postman Always Rings Twice is such an anomaly for being an MGM film because it's a beautiful image of Garfield and Lana Turner, uh, not something that MGM traditionally did. If you look at their poster for The Asphalt Jungle, that's more typical of just chock a block, all of like a cutout head of
Yeah.
the actor and a listing of all the people that are in it. Um, and then Steve says, I remember you mentioning that you purchased a bunch of old movie posters. More than a bunch. I remember he's talking about how I had a find at a flea market where I found like 15 lobby cards. There weren't posters, there were lobby cards. which one turned out to be your favorite? Well, that was finding a lobby card from In a Lonely Place with Bogart on it.
Oof.
For like $5 was
Oh my God.
that was pretty good. So anyway, just to show you, this is not something I used to do. I still do this all the time. So here are two of my latest acquisitions. Let me see if I can make some room here. This is an Italian locandina.
Oh, I love the Italian posters.
Yes. This is for a movie called Three Steps to the Gallows, which was made in England, a Scott Brady film. See,
Oh, there he is.
yeah. But when I see stuff like this online, I just buy it instantly because look at that art. That art is
beautiful.
absolutely
The colors.
spectacular. And this poster cost me $20.
Oh, wow.
It cost almost as much to ship it as it cost to buy the poster. So I love that. And this one, this is a film that I recently discovered, thanks to my friend Dan Klaus, who some people may know as one of the great comic book writers and artists in the world. And Dan turned me on to this movie, which I loved, and I got this poster online for hardly any money. This is going to be a little tricky to display this, but as you can see,
Stagger across the bridge.
Across the bridge. Hold on. And then here's how we tie it all together. Look at the bottom of the poster.
Ah,
look at
puppy dog.
This dog is one of the great dogs in noir. So we're going to make Sharon go back and redo her entire story because it did not include this dog named Dolores. This movie is really something. It's based on a Graham Greene short story, and it's Rod Steiger actually underplaying a role.
Wow.
Which is hard to believe. It's worth it just to watch Rod Steiger be quiet in a movie. And it's just a terrific story. And the dog figures prominently in the plot. And I'll set it up for you, right? Rod Steiger plays a venal businessman who embezzles from his company and is caught. This is the very beginning of the movie. And he goes on the run to escape the law. And he's on a train and he's trying to get out of the country to Mexico to avoid arrest. And in a particularly Patricia Highsmith twist, although this is Graham Greene writing the story, he encounters a guy on the train who looks kind of like him.
Uh-oh.
And in noir, that's bad news, right? So he trades places with this guy, let's say. But what he doesn't realize is that the guy has a dog.
Ah.
And so the dog becomes a huge part of the story. And it's a great character arc told through the dog.
Oh.
Right, because he has absolutely no use for the dog, and he's very, very cruel and tries to get rid of the dog, but the dog keeps coming back, and it's just fantastic, and it has a great ending. So it's actually a film I'm hoping we can find a 35 millimeter print of because I want to show it at Noir City.
I'd love to see
January. Yeah. It's really good. And there I have now I own the poster for it. I think that's the British poster for it. And it was a British American co-production because there's a lot of British actors in the film in addition to Rod Steiger.
Well, I'd want to double it up with the Hidden Room.
If it's a dog movie, yes. I think we've discussed in the past our fondness for Monty, the dog in the Hidden Room. Yeah,
he's a good dog.
He is a good dog, the best dog,
He's
best
the best
dog in noir, maybe.
Yeah, up there.
Definitely. Okay, so I think
Yeah.
we managed to do this, and I don't want you to get in trouble on your lunch hour. I only saw one person in your office behind you during all of this, and he didn't seem to care that you were doing this. So
Yeah, that was
of
Paul.
course,
Paul's cool.
of course you're in a glassed in room, right?
Yes.
So they don't have any idea what you're actually talking about. So you could be closing some important deal for the company. Yeah, okay.
There you go.
Okay.
There you go. So thank you, everybody. We're into the May questions. So I don't know. We're really keeping to our 2-week schedule. I'm very happy for us. So hopefully we can continue on every 2 weeks and get caught up on our questions somehow.
Yeah, that'll be good. So we'll do this between, because I'm going to Mexico, and I'm introducing El Vampiro Negro and La Bestia debe morir, the beast must die, at the festival in Morelia, and then I come back, and we can do another one of these when I come back, and then I have the TCM cruise in early November. Then when I get back from that, there's nothing. There's nothing for the rest of the year. I plan on just being home and catching up on a bunch of stuff. So I look forward to more questions. And as usual, I thank everybody for sending in these really good questions. And we'll be doing this again real soon.
Yeah, and just a quick note to everybody. So if you want to get the North City Magazine, the digital version as they come out, you can do that by donating to the Film Noir Foundation, $20 or more, and that's at filmnoirfoundation.org. And you have to sign up on our email list because we send you the link to download the issue as it comes out. And those come out, the print edition comes out a little later, so you kind of get it faster. And so you can do that. That would be nice.
We would appreciate it. Absolutely.
Yeah. And we have great writers like Sharon. So
indeed. And I couldn't be happier with the way the magazine is going. Imogen is a fantastic editor-in-chief. Danilo Castro, Steve Cronenberg, and of course Michael's work designing the whole thing, and all the tremendous contributors. So you win either way, whether you just want to get the digital version or the print version, or get them both, because there are changes. I mean, there are differences between the two editions. So anyway, okay, Anne, thanks a million for taking the time to do this during the middle of your workday.
Yeah.
I'm sorry you didn't get your lunch, but we'll make it up to you somehow. So.
I ate beforehand, so I would
very good.
Cranky during the broadcast.
See you later. Thanks, everybody.